Welcome to Reddit Aliens. Police officers of Reddit, what's the creepiest missing persons case that you've ever been assigned to? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I'm late to the party, but I'll answer, actually early. We get a call from a husband that his wife and mother-in-law have been missing for 3 days. Their 2 small children are with dad, and he claimed he didn't know what happened. The husband had massive history of domestic violence with his first wife, and we were pretty concerned for the well-being of his wife and mother-in-law, especially since they vanished without packing and didn't take the kids. I show up at the house, and the husband gives me the creeps, just a really effing weird vibe, and every single hair in my body is standing up. I feel nothing but dread as I listen to him tell me that he has no idea where they went and couldn't explain why he waited 3 days to call police, especially with 2 small kids at home. We couldn't find any trace of evidence, and I was really perplexed. Found out later that the wife and her mom went across the US border to go shopping, and they both got arrested for shoplifting and were spending a week in jail while waiting for trial, since they were Canadians and a flight risk. It was hilariously awkward breaking the truth to him, but a huge relief. Not a police officer, but my granddad was. He was part of the police force in the 60s till the early 80s. Sometime during the 70s, he was assigned to a missing persons case that had been ongoing for a while and had actually been reassigned due to the lack of new evidence. Him and his partner spent months on the case fighting for it to stay open. One day, they went and searched the missing person's home again. It caused a lot of uproar with the family, as they hadn't really moved his things or been into his home since the case had gone quiet. Anyway, they got permission almost a month after asking and found a handwritten receipt for a car in his bathroom bin. God knows why his bins weren't searched before, unless it was just missed. They managed to track down the guy who sold him the car. He said that the missing person had mentioned that he was going to store his car in a garage till he had the money to insure it. He even gave them the name of the town he said the garages were in. They went to the town and got search warrants for every single rentable garage, even though they had no evidence he had ever rented one. After a couple of days, they found the car with the guy inside it. Apparently, his body was almost mummified because of the lack of sun, air, and moisture. I can't imagine what the smell was like. But they think he accidentally killed himself while trying to do some work on the car. He would have had the garage door closed because his car wasn't insured. He didn't want anyone to see the car and steal it. It was stored in a rough neighborhood where the garages were cheap to rent. He also paid cash in hand, so he never had any receipts. So yeah, he died of carbon monoxide poisoning. It's painless and basically you just fall asleep and then you die. He wouldn't have realized until it was too late. The guy was missing for 5 months and he seemed to just disappear for no known reason. My granddad told me this when I was a kid, and it really scared me that people can so easily just go missing or die and nobody knows where they are. Still kind of freaks me out. Imagine if they would have checked the garbage before all of that, but at least the family was put at ease and the story was solved. In the town I grew up in, UK, a woman in her 30s, her 3 kids, and their car all went missing. Her husband was known for being a bit of a lad, and the immediate presumption was she'd had enough and left him, but her parents hadn't heard from her. Her bank account wasn't used, etc., but it was nearly a week before anybody seemed to get really worried about it. She'd picked the kids up from school and then never went home, even though it was only a 10-minute journey. Eventually, one of the 10-year-old son's friends mentioned that he was planning on trying to get his mom to go to get them a McFlurry. The nearest McDonald's was a town away. They eventually realized that instead of going straight home, she'd agreed to drive to the McDonald's and gone the back way, part of which is along what we call the 40-foot, basically a massive dike. Found them all still strapped into the car at the bottom. The husband was engaged again, and his fiancée pregnant within a year. My grandfather was a policeman and a fireman at different points in his life. His spooky disappearance story actually came from his time as a fireman. He hasn't told me the story in a long while, so I'm a little fuzzy in the details, but here goes. His team gets called to a house fire in a small village, rural England. It's late at night. The fire is reported by a local who was walking home. Several other bystanders have arrived by the time the fire engine gets there, and there are multiple reports of screams for help from inside the building. They start to douse the fire, and 3 of the responders, including my granddad, entered the building via the back door to attempt to rescue people trapped inside. The thing is, they don't find a soul. Nobody is there. They clear the whole place out, stop the fire, effectively make the building safe. Later on, it's confirmed that the fire started in the kitchen, likely the hob, where food was midway through being prepared. As far as anyone knew, the couple who lived there had been at home. Relatives had no idea where they might have gone that night. My granddad and his colleagues have a funny feeling, so they get local police properly involved. Crime scene investigation uncovers blood on the floor in one room, but any other evidence was destroyed in the fire. They can't confirm who the blood belongs to. It apparently didn't match the blood types of the 2 vanished residents. The fire department are very suspicious at this point, and apparently the police want to drop the investigation in favor of a manhunt for the missing people. But they end up expanding the investigation radius and find that apparently an unidentified van was parked outside the house that left just before the fire was reported. The investigation goes dead, but over a year later, they find the burned remains of the man who lived there in a grave in the woods several towns away. They never found the woman, so it was suspected that she killed him and burned down the house to conceal it. They never figured out where the screams from inside the building were coming from, though. Not a cop, but had a pretty effed up disappearance happen about a mile from where I live. A girl went missing. She was 12. The whole town, state police, and I believe possibly the FBI all got involved. Search parties in the woods and through the streets for about 2 or 3 days. Turns out, she had gone over to these kids' house that she knew from school to have them fix her bike. Turns out the kids, brother 1, 15, and the other 17, planned on stealing it. Well, she put up a struggle, and the one brother wound up strangling her in his basement. She was found a few days after she went missing. They stuffed her body in a trash can on trash night. Not a cop, but I did my undergrad at a college in Vermont. In the winter, we would quite literally be snowed under. Over Christmas break, a sophomore went missing. He wasn't a close friend, but we had a couple of classes together. It was a small liberal arts college in a small town, so everyone in the community was pretty freaked out. His phone and wallet were left in his room, so the theory was that he'd been abducted and maybe even killed. Campus got real scary for a few months. There was police everywhere, helicopters overhead, students marching through the snow in lines looking for a body. Finally, when the snow and ice thawed, they found his body in the creek. Police surmise he entered the water from the bridge in town, but no one knows if he jumped or was pushed. This one still haunts me. Dealt several times with a young mother who would always go missing for a few days and leave her child with relatives. Several missing persons reports over time. Turns out she was shacking up with her PCP-dealing boyfriend in a nearby city. One day, the lady walks in and says her daughter was kidnapped. I do some work and find the aunt took the child because mom is just a terrible person. State did not want to get involved, so we have to give the kid back. I turn to my partner and tell him mom will definitely be dead within a few months, probably turn up in a ditch or dumped in the river, where she goes to visit her dealer boyfriend. Fast forward 3 months, and I turn on the news to see the story of a woman found dumped in the river. It was mom. She was stabbed to death by her boyfriend and dumped in that river. That one creeped me out a bit. Some lost souls just can't be saved. Hopefully the daughter ended up with the aunt or in a loving home. My uncle went missing about 25 years ago in New Jersey. My dad had been so sad about it ever since, and this was before I was born. He had a history of mental illness, but the weird part is he has never been found. We don't know if he changed identities or got killed or went off his meds and went homeless, but it's been over 2 decades, and it still puzzled me to this day what happened to him. My dad even got Howard Stern one day to say live on the air, "Kevin Castello, if you're out there and listening to this, your brother is looking for you." I remember being a kid and listening to it on the radio. He just disappeared without a trace. So odd. My dad went through some of his belongings and has a trunk of some of his old stuff still in storage. Brandon Lawson. He ran out of gas on the highway in the middle of the night and called his brother to come help him. Shortly after, he called 911 and reported that someone had chased him into the woods and that he needed police. Eventually, his brother and one police officer arrive at the scene and find his truck abandoned but no sign of Brandon. Brandon calls his brother and says he's bleeding and is 10 minutes away from his truck. That was the last anyone ever heard from him, and searches of the area turned up empty. Not me personally, but other officers on my department. A 70-year-old female with dementia would often leave her home and go for walks around her property. One day, she never came home, and it should be noted that we live on an island 30 miles out from the rest of the United States. State police, canines, our entire department, news helicopters, Coast Guard helicopters and boats, Marine Division, all searched land and ocean for this woman. We've reviewed security footage at the airport and steamship ferry to see if she boarded either to leave island, but she didn't. She was never found, and to this day, we don't know what happened. 2 theories have arrived though. She walked right into the ocean and somehow her body disappeared and never washed up, or 2, she walked into the construction site of a sewer plant and fell into a tank full of waste, just before the tank was permanently covered. I'm not a cop, but when I was in high school, a kid in my class went out fishing with his dad one weekend in the bay. They never came back. Searches went on, but nothing. Never found any bodies. They found the boat a few weeks later, empty of course. It's been 8 years, and nothing has ever been found. It's assumed they fell overboard, maybe in some rough water, and drowned. They were both avid fishers, and could swim. Weird that no bodies were ever found, or washed up. Late to the party, but here goes. Responded to missing person report. Husband was the caller reporting his wife was missing. Wife had debilitating condition and was bedridden for several months. Husband said he went to dinner across town and discovered wife was gone upon returning home. No sign of her in the house or in the area. No kids were living at home. Search and rescue came out and spent all night searching the area with no luck. Scent dogs didn't even find anything. The whole time, I'm imagining we're going to be discussing this case sometime in the future on Forensic Files. It was an eerie feeling to be sitting with a man and talking to him while thinking he may have just killed his wife, but having to treat him like he was a concerned husband. Fast forward to the next day, and a neighbor found her about 1.5 blocks away, tucked down behind their bushes in their yard. No foul play. Turns out something just happened and wandered away, but lost energy and collapsed in that yard. Sadly, she reported seeing the glow sticks on the scent dog's collar walking nearby on the road, but nobody or none of the dogs came close enough in the yard to find her until that neighbor came out that next morning. Well, it is nice to occasionally hear some of these stories end up relatively with a happy ending. Just a shame she had to spend the night in those bushes. I'm not a cop, but in my hometown near Savannah, Georgia, just a month or 2 ago, a 14-year-old girl was missing for 2 weeks before it was reported. One of the neighbors was concerned that she hadn't seen the girl in so long, and after a while the police figured it was the father and stepmother. They brought out the dogs and found a grave just off the property where the girl had been buried, and they ended up finding her brother too, who had also been murdered by their father 2 years prior at the age of 14. Who, he said, had moved out of state to live with their mother. Nobody ever questioned his disappearance, but the father and stepmother had apparently been abusive their whole lives and pretty much kept them locked up. I'm a corrections sergeant for a small county in rural Alabama. About 2 years ago, I had just become a supervisor. I was assigned to Delta Shift, which at that point was considered the shit shift. I was brand new and given the task of whipping this bunch of turds into shape. I was barely 1 month into the driver's seat when one of my most trusted inmates just goes apeshit. It was in mid-February when this occurred, relatively cold and very shitty. The inmate involved had been in and out of the facility for most of his life. Papa nearly more clout in the jail than I did. The man was the most trusted inmate we've ever had and was even assigned to work alongside the maintenance officer with limited supervision, until the night that he ate nearly 2 ounces of meth and proceeded to freak the F out. Papa asked to be let out to fix a toilet in booking. The control officer let him out and then let him roam up to the booking foyer. Here, we entirely lost track of him. The detention center spent the next 9 hours on lockdown thanks to this. When my officers finally found him, he had gotten into the ceiling access with a stolen key. Papa had watched us from the master monitor in the server room the entire time. Every time someone would look in the server room, he would hide inside the cabinets. If we got too far from finding him, he would scream at the top of his lungs until we turned around, all from the ceiling across the entire jail. Creepiest experience of my life. I've seen some shit through the infantry and this job. Nothing beats that one, not even doing CPR on a suicide. Shit was bone-chilling. TLDR. Corrections officer searched for a highly unstable and intoxicated inmate for the better part of a night, sometimes being less than a few feet from them.